Why does this husky stare down that same lonely road every single day, her blue eyes fixed like she's waiting for the world to end or a miracle to begin? I wondered aloud one frosty morning, but when I finally followed her gaze to its heartbreaking source, it unraveled everything I thought I knew about loss and loyalty, pulling me into a journey that would mend the fractures in my own weary soul and illuminate paths I never imagined walking again. You know those moments when life feels like it's just coasting along in quiet routine, but then something small tugs at you until you can't ignore it anymore, like a loose thread that unravels the whole sweater, exposing vulnerabilities you didn't realize were there. That's how it started for me, back in the dimming days of autumn in a sleepy town tucked away in the hills of upstate New York, where the leaves turn brilliant shades of gold and crimson before the first real chill sets in, blanketing the air with the comforting scent of wood smoke from chimneys and the rich, damp earth after evening rains. I'm Jack, 38 years old, and I'd been marking time in a modest rented house on the outskirts since my divorce 2 years prior. Nothing dramatic or explosive like the movies make it out to be. Just the slow, inevitable fade of a marriage that couldn't weather the storms of unspoken resentments, mismatched dreams about the future, and the relentless long hours I poured into my work at the local garage. Sarah had always wanted kids. A big, bustling family filling the house with laughter, chaos, and the kind of warmth that turns a place into a home. I, on the other hand, threw everything into my job as a mechanic, fixing up the heavy-duty trucks that hauled lumber from the nearby dense forests, convinced that the overtime checks and steady reliability would build the secure foundation we talked about on those quiet evenings wrapped in each other's arms. But futures have a way of slipping through your fingers like so much black engine oil, leaving indelible stains you can't quite scrub clean no matter how hard you try. And before I knew it, she was gone, leaving behind a house that echoed with absence. Now, it was just me, rattling around in that empty space with its echoing hallways lined with faded family photos we never updated. A kitchen table perpetually set for one, cooking single portions of simple spaghetti or grilled cheese sandwiches while staring out the window at the darkening woods. I'd take the same looping trail through the trees each evening to clear the fog from my head, the crunch of leaves underfoot a rhythmic distraction from the what-ifs that crowded my thoughts. The neighbors were kind enough in their small-town way, waving from weathered porches as I passed by on my walks or nodding politely at the post office when I'd pick up my stack of bills and junk mail, but I kept my distance, building invisible walls around my solitude higher with each passing month. Grief's a solitary thing, or so I told myself back then. A heavy cloak that numbs you from the inside out and makes the world feel distant, like you're watching it all through fogged glass smeared with relentless rain, unable to reach through and touch anything real. I'd first noticed her a couple of weeks before that morning, during one of those fading afternoon walks when the sun hangs low in the sky and casts long, golden shadows across the trail that dance like fleeting memories across the ground. A striking husky, her silver and white coat gleaming even in the dimming light, standing at the edge of the old county road that branched off from my path and wound lazily up into the hills toward the long-abandoned quarry, a place locals avoided after dark. She wasn't wandering aimlessly or begging for scraps like the occasional stray you'd see sniffing around the dumpsters behind the local diner with its neon sign flickering on rainy nights. She just stood there, statue still and resolute, her piercing blue eyes locked on the empty stretch of cracked asphalt that disappeared into a thicket of towering maples and resilient pines. Her ears perked forward as if listening intently for a sound only she could hear, carried on the whispering breeze from some far-off invisible place. Huskies have that intense, almost otherworldly gaze, bred from their ancient Siberian roots for scanning endless, unforgiving snowfields during grueling hunts or historic sled runs across frozen expanses. But this was different. Patient, almost mournful, laced with a quiet desperation that made my steps falter mid-stride, pulling me to a halt. I'd pass by on my walks, tossing her a casual evening girl from a safe distance of about 30 feet, respecting the way her muscular body tensed slightly at the sound of my voice, but she'd barely acknowledge me, her focus unbreakable, those vivid blue eyes never wavering from the horizon as if the rest of the world had ceased to exist. No collar glinting in the fading light, no tags jingling with each subtle shift. Lean but not starved to the point of desperation, with that classic curled tail resting gracefully over her back, and the distinctive black mask framing her expressive face that screamed purebred endurance and untamed wild heritage passed down through generations. I figured at first she belonged to one of the reclusive folks who lived further up the road in scattered cabins, perhaps waiting faithfully for her owner to come home from a late shift at the mill or a commute to the distant city lights. But day after day, whether rain turned the path to slick mud or the sun warmed the scattered stones underfoot, there she was, positioned like a vigilant sentinel right at mile marker 12, the spot where the road curved sharply past a cluster of forgotten rusted mailboxes leaning like weary old soldiers against the encroaching undergrowth. Curiosity got the better of me eventually, building like pressure in a sealed engine over those initial sightings, humming in the back of my mind during long shifts at the garage where I'd lose myself in the rhythm of wrenches and diagnostics until I couldn't just glance and move on without wondering more. After a few more days of watching her from afar, I'd started bringing small treats along to test the waters, bits of sharp cheddar cheese pilfered from my lunch sandwiches, figuring every dog has a weakness for something rich and unexpected that cuts through the ordinary. She'd sniff the air when I approached cautiously, her keen nose twitching with that legendary husky sense honed for tracking elusive prey across vast tundras or navigating blizzards in real-life sled teams like those in the famous Iditarod races, but she wouldn't budge an inch from her post, those blue eyes flicking to me briefly in wary assessment before snapping back to the empty road like a compass needle locked on true north, unyielding. "What are you waiting for out here, huh? Some lost adventure or a familiar face down that way?" I'd mutter under my breath, leaving the food on the roadside gravel where stubborn weeds poked through the cracks, and retreat to watch from behind the thick trunk of a nearby oak tree, its bark rough under my palms. She'd eat it later, once I was well out of sight and the shadows lengthened, approaching with deliberate measured steps and devouring it with efficient gulps that spoke of survival rather than indulgence. But she never came closer, never invited contact or eased her guard. It became a fragile ritual, that quiet exchange amid the rustling leaves overhead and the distant melodic calls of birds settling for the night, and in my lonelier moments at home, staring at the ceiling after nursing a single beer on the porch, I'd find myself talking more to the memory of her steadfast form, sharing snippets of my day like she was a therapist wrapped in soft fur, someone who wouldn't interrupt or offer empty platitudes that rang hollow. Another flat tire on Old Man Wilkins' ancient Ford today. Guy acts like it's my fault the potholes are winning the endless war against his suspension, but I got it purring again by lunch. Her husky stoicism, that unyielding presence even in her absence from my side, was oddly comforting in its reliability. No pitying looks or awkward silences that made you squirm, just the steady rhythm of showing up day after day, mirroring the loyalty I'd once hoped for in my own life. But the road she watched so faithfully, with such single-minded devotion, it led nowhere productive now. The quarry had shut down a full decade ago after a devastating collapse that made local headlines and scarred the community, leaving behind rusted gates padlocked shut against intruders, overgrown access paths choked with thorny briars and wild raspberry canes, and a profound silence that hung heavy in the air, like unspoken regrets. No cars passed that way anymore, not even the locals taking dusty shortcuts to avoid town traffic, turning it into a ghost vein snaking through the map, forgotten by all but perhaps this one determined soul. What could possibly draw her there so faithfully, day in and out, with such unwavering intensity that it bordered on something sacred? One overcast Saturday, with the wind picking up from the north and swirling fallen leaves into frantic, eddying dances across the weathered pavement, I decided to follow her when she finally trotted off after her daily vigil, her silver coat blending seamlessly with the gray, brooding sky as she moved with quiet determination. She didn't notice me at first, slipping effortlessly into the dense underbrush that ran parallel to the road like a hidden vein, her movements fluid and purposeful, that innate husky grace carrying her over tangled roots, mossy stones, and occasional puddles without a single stumble, as if the forest itself parted for her passage. I kept my distance to avoid spooking her, heart thumping with a mix of intrigue and a prickling unease that raised the hairs on my neck. Strays can turn unpredictable in unfamiliar territory, especially one so intensely focused and seemingly driven by an invisible, compelling force, and trailed her quietly, my boots crunching softly on the thick layer of leaf litter to minimize the noise, though every snap felt amplified in the still air. The path narrowed as we climbed higher into the undulating hills, the air growing cooler and damper with each labored step, scented sharply with the resinous tang of pine needles and the rich, loamy earth turned over by recent heavy rains that had swollen nearby streams. She stopped abruptly at a chain-link fence half buried in a tangled mass of wild vines, creeping ivy, and thorny blackberry brambles, the old perimeter of the quarry sagging under years of relentless neglect and the brutal assault of changing weather seasons, and slipped through a wide gap rusted open by time, exposure, and the slow creep of corrosion. I hesitated for a moment at the edge, glancing back down at the fading ribbon of road below where civilization felt just out of reach, then followed suit, the cold, jagged metal scraping against my palms and snagging the fabric of my jacket as I pushed through with gritted teeth. Beyond the fence lay an overgrown clearing that felt like stepping into a forgotten, eerie world suspended in time. Tall weeds and young saplings choking what used to be a bustling parking lot for the workers' vehicles during the quarry's heyday, scattered gravel crunching underfoot like brittle bones unearthed from shallow graves. And at the far edge, half hidden by a thick curtain of brambles and thorny bushes that clawed at the sky, stood the rusted shell of an old pickup truck. Its bed collapsed inward under the immense weight of time, harsh weather elements, and the relentless encroaching overgrowth that sought to reclaim it entirely. She approached it slowly, her steps measured and almost reverent in their caution, letting out a soft whine that twisted something deep and unprotected in my gut, a sound so raw, vulnerable, and laced with longing that it echoed the quiet, persistent aches I'd buried since Sarah's departure, resurfacing like ghosts in the dim light. She nosed at the tailgate gently with her black nose, her paws scraping lightly at the frozen ground as if coaxing a long-lost response from the oppressive silence surrounding us, her blue eyes shimmering with an emotion so palpable I could feel its weight across the distance that separated us. That's when I saw it, stepping closer despite her low, warning growl that rumbled like distant thunder rolling over the hills, etched into the driver's door, faded but still legible through layers of rust, scratches, and accumulated grime. The name Blue in rough, hand-carved letters that looked like they'd been done with a pocket knife in a moment of grief, surrounded by faint paw prints that appeared clawed in haste and repetition over time. My breath caught in my throat, sharp and sudden as a snapped wire. No, not just a name or a casual marking from some idle vandal, a makeshift memorial, pieced together with whatever materials were at hand in the chaos of aftermath. I edged nearer, ignoring the brambles tugging insistently at my jeans and the sting of thorns pricking my skin, and there, bolted crudely to the doorframe with what looked like scavenged hardware store bolts rusted in place, was a small, weathered metal plaque that had once been shiny and new, but now bore the patina of years exposed to rain, sun, and snow. In memory of Blue, the best damn quarry dog this side of the Hudson. Gone too soon, 2022. We'll miss you, buddy. Quarry crew forever. The truck had been left there intentionally since the accident. A catastrophic cave-in that claimed 2 dedicated workers and their loyal Husky companion who always rode shotgun in the cab, barking enthusiastic greetings to the crew at every shift change and alerting to dangers with his keen senses. Locals still whispered about it over steaming coffee at the diner or cold beers at the VFW hall on Friday nights. How Blue had barked frantic, urgent warnings that last fateful day. But it was too late. The unstable ground giving way in a deafening roar of dust, stone, and shattered lives. This Husky, this patient waiting one, must have been his mate, or perhaps a close kin from the same resilient litter bred for the rugged work, returning every single day without fail to the exact spot where he'd vanished forever into the unforgiving rubble. Her blue eyes so strikingly similar to what his must have been in life, now brimming with a sorrow that hit me like a freight train, barreling out of the enveloping dark, unstoppable, and profound. She wasn't waiting for a miraculous return or some impossible reunion pulled from fairy tales. She was mourning in the only way her instinctual heart knew how, faithful to the end in a way that shamed my own half-hearted attempts at moving on from the shattered life Sarah and I had once shared, highlighting the depths of loyalty I could only aspire to. I backed away then, slowly and without a word to break the sacred hush, giving her the space to continue her ritual undisturbed, my throat tight with a lump I couldn't swallow down, the sheer weight of her devotion pressing down on my chest like the immense, unyielding rock of the quarry's fallen debris itself. But I couldn't just leave her to that endless solitary vigil alone, out in the elements with nothing but faded memories and the whisper of wind for company. It felt wrong, like abandoning a piece of my own unresolved pain. The next day, under a sky still heavy with the ominous promise of the season's first heavy snow, I returned equipped with more than just the usual treats. A thick, warm wool blanket I'd pulled from the back of my closet, the kind Sarah used to wrap around us on chilly movie nights, while we binge-watched old westerns, folded neatly and left by the fence with a simple note scribbled on a piece of cardboard from the garage. For the cold nights ahead, stay warm. She eyed it warily from her steadfast post, those piercing blue eyes narrowing in initial suspicion as I retreated. But later that evening, when I circled back discreetly through the woods to check, I saw she'd dragged it through the rusted gap with determined tugs, arranging it carefully around the base of the truck like a protective nest woven from care. That simple, unspoken act started our real connection. A bridge built from quiet persistence, mutual respect, and the unspoken understanding that sometimes showing up is the greatest kindness. I'd sit a ways off on a fallen log covered in moss, talking softly into the whispering wind about my own tangled losses. The way Sarah's final words still echoed hollowly in the empty house, her voice cracking as she said, "I need more than this life we're stuck in." The way grief makes you feel like you're betraying the one who's gone by simply drawing breath each morning and carrying on. It's okay to let go a little at a time, girl. Doesn't mean you forget the good or dishonor what was. It just means you make room for something new to grow in the spaces left behind. Her husky resilience shone through vividly in those early exchanges. She'd listen with her head tilted slightly to one side, that classic breed curiosity flickering across her distinctive masked face like a spark in the dusk, occasionally leaning toward the sound of my voice as if weighing my words against the weight of her own deep-seated heartache. Over the following weeks, as the autumn chill deepened into the sharper bite of early winter with frost-etching patterns on my truck's windshield each dawn, she'd let me draw closer bit by bit, accepting tentative scratches behind her soft, velvety ears where the fur was thickest and warmest, her coat proving even more insulating and plush under my calloused fingers than I'd imagined, designed by evolution to withstand the fiercest Arctic blasts and prolonged exposure in the wilds. I named her Echo in my mind after that first real interaction, for how she mirrored that unending weight with such precision, echoing the profound loyalty Blue had shown until his very last breath in service to his human pack. And soon the name slipped out naturally in my one-sided conversations like an old, comfortable habit worn smooth by time. Winter deepened around us inexorably, blanketing the rolling hills in a thick, pristine layer of white that muffled all sounds into a hushed world and turned every exhaled breath into a visible puff hanging in the frigid air. But Echo's routine held firm despite the cold that bit through even her double-layered fur with its dense undercoat. Her husky endurance a living testament to generations of survival in climes far harsher than these temperate hills, much like the real Siberian huskies that powered early explorers across frozen Alaska. I'd bundle up in multiple layers, starting with a soft flannel shirt against my skin, topped by a heavy insulated coat lined with synthetic down, and thick gloves tough enough to handle scalding hot engine parts without flinching, and join her at the road each fading evening, bringing a thermos of hot water to carefully melt the accumulating ice from her paws after hours of steadfast standing, sharing stories by the lengthening shadow of the truck as the short days grew even shorter with the solstice approaching. One brutal blizzard night, when the wind howled like vengeful banshees through the bare, skeletal branches and visibility dropped to mere feet in the swirling whiteout, I found her huddled low against the unyielding fence, shivering despite her natural protections against the cold, her blue eyes dimmed by sheer exhaustion but still fixed resolutely on the buried road ahead. "Come on, Echo, let's get you out of this mess. You don't have to face it alone anymore, not if you don't want to," I coaxed gently, opening the passenger door of my battered truck with promises of genuine warmth and unthreatening safety, the engine idling with a low rumble. She hesitated at first, paws planted firm in the snow-like roots, that independent husky streak flaring briefly in a soft, rumbling growl from deep in her chest. But something in my steady, reassuring voice, or the inviting lure of shelter from the storm, won out in the end. She climbed in with a wary glance back at the horizon, her body tense but committed. Back at the house, by the roaring fire I'd stoked high in the stone hearth with logs from the backyard stack, she thawed, literally, with steam rising from her fur as the heat penetrated and in ways I couldn't yet fully name or articulate, curling up at my feet on the woven rug as I spoke at length of forgiveness, how clutching onto pain like a twisted lifeline ultimately honors no one, least of all the ones we've lost to time or circumstance, drawing from personal reflections inspired by stories of wartime dogs who waited years for soldiers never to return. Her presence became a soothing balm that night, mending something raw and exposed inside me without effort. Her unwavering loyalty a profound, wordless lesson in the quiet, transformative power of compassion, much like the therapy dogs I've since learned about in articles, trained to sit with the grieving and offer silent solidarity. Spring arrived tentatively at last, with the slow, persistent drip of melting snow from rain gutters and the first tender green shoots pushing defiantly through the softening mud along the roadsides and trail edges, coaxing the world back to vibrant life after months of dormancy. Echo's vigils began to soften around the edges during those transitional days, her time at the post shortening incrementally as our walks together lengthened into fuller explorations of the thawing woods, where rivulets of water carved new paths and the air filled with the fresh scent of awakening soil. We'd navigate the muddy trails side by side, her leading with that purposeful, athletic trot unique to her breed, her blue eyes less shadowed by haunting memories now and more alive with the returning light filtering through the budding canopy overhead, reflecting the delicate new leaves unfurling on branches. Trials came without warning in that season of change, testing the bond we'd forged through winter's trials. A close call with the opportunistic pack of coyotes one dusky evening as we ventured further afield, where her husky protectiveness flared like a sudden wildfire across dry tinder, her deep, resonant bark scattering them into the underbrush before they could close the distance, saving my leg from what could have been a nasty, tearing bite that might have sidelined me for weeks. But each challenge only strengthened us, building layers of mutual trust thicker and more resilient than the winter ice that had finally cracked under spring's warmth. She taught me in those shared moments of survival, quick recovery, and reflection under starry skies that waiting doesn't always mean clinging desperately to irreplaceable loss. Sometimes it's a sacred space for healing to take root and flourish, much like how I've read about service dogs in veterans programs, their steady companionship helping warriors forgive the scars of battle and reclaim steps forward. In the quieter interludes, as we rested on sun-warmed rocks overlooking the sweeping valley below, with its patchwork of farms and forests, I'd reflect deeply on Sarah, finally forgiving myself for the role I played in our unraveling, the endless long hours at the garage that left her feeling isolated in our home, the crucial words left unsaid until resentment festered, Echo's gentle, insistent nudge against my side during those pauses affirming that peace was not only possible, but already blooming within reach. Now, with summers warming the air lazily and filling the long days with the steady hum of bees among clover fields and the sweet, heady scent of wildflowers nodding in the breeze along meadow edges, Echo pads beside me on our familiar, well-trodden routes, her tail curling in joyful, loose arcs rather than the tense vigilance of those early months. That road, once a path etched deeply with layers of sorrow and unyielding weight, has become a trail of rediscovery and gentle peace, winding through memories now softened by time. She's the echo of my heart now, a living, breathing reminder that loyalty can heal even the deepest, most jagged wounds if given the chance, leaving behind a warmth that lingers long after the story fades into quiet reflection, like the soft, persistent glow of embers in a spent fire that promises renewal with the next dawn. If you found this story helpful, please give it a 1 in the comments. If not, give it a 0. Your response will let me know if my story helped anyone. But let me back up a bit, because that profound bond we built didn't form in a rush of overwhelming sentiment or dramatic gestures. It unfolded slowly, layer by layer, like the deliberate changing of the seasons themselves, each one peeling back more of who we both truly were beneath the guarded surfaces we presented to the world. After that first pivotal night by the crackling fire, when Echo had finally crossed the threshold into my home with hesitant paws, leaving faint muddy prints on the worn hardwood floors that creaked under her weight, I woke to find her still there in the pale morning light, curled tightly in the dog bed I'd hastily assembled from an old comforter folded thick and extra pillows scavenged from the linen closet, her blue eyes watching me with a careful mix of lingering caution and budding curiosity as I shuffled groggily to the kitchen for my ritual coffee. The house, which had felt like a hollow, echoing shell since Sarah's abrupt departure, its walls reverberating with the ghosts of heated arguments, tender reconciliations, and the unspoken goodbyes that hung in the air like smoke, suddenly hummed with a new, subtle energy that was undeniable, her soft, rhythmic breathing a gentle counterpoint to the profound quiet I'd grown numbly accustomed to over lonely months. That first full morning together, with sunlight filtering warmly through the lace curtains Sarah had handpicked years ago during a weekend shopping trip we both regretted not extending, I scrambled eggs for us both in the cast-iron skillet she'd left behind, keeping hers plain and unseasoned to avoid upsetting her sensitive stomach, and watched in quiet fascination as she devoured them with that efficient, hearty, husky gusto, her tail thumping rhythmically against the floorboards in what I interpreted as genuine approval and contentment. It marked the unassuming start of our mornings, a simple yet grounding ritual that anchored me amid the flux. Me, with my steaming mug of black coffee, brewed strong enough to cut through the fog of sleep, regrets, and lingering doubts like a blade. Her, with her ceramic bowl of high-quality kibble mixed with a dollop of canned food for added flavor and moisture. The two of us sharing the intimate space of the kitchen without the pressure of forced words or expectations. Just the pure comfort of shared presence in the dawn's hush. Her husky independence shone through vividly, even in those domestic moments. She'd explore the rooms methodically while I got ready for the day ahead, sniffing curiously at the baseboards etched with years of subtle wear, peering out the windows with ears perked alert to the stirrings of the waking neighborhood, but always circling back to my side with unerring instinct when I grabbed my keys from the hook by the door, as if she intuitively understood the ebb and flow of departure and eventual return, a pattern as reliable as the rising sun. Life at the garage took on a fresh, invigorating rhythm after that turning point, the familiar clank of tools against metal, and the guttural growl of engines no longer serving just as white noise to drown out intrusive thoughts, but something I now hurried through with purpose, eager for the heartfelt greeting that awaited at home, that joyful, resonant husky howl echoing from the front porch as I pulled my truck into the gravel driveway, her elegant silver form silhouetted dramatically against the fading hues of twilight. Our walks extended far beyond the confining boundaries of that once lonely road, venturing deeper into the enveloping woods where the paths wound like vital veins through stands of ancient oaks, heavy with moss and sturdy hemlocks whispering secrets to the wind. Echo leading the way with purposeful, athletic strides that showcased her breed's legendary stamina. Her keen nose pressed low to the ground, picking up elusive scents of deer trails winding through the understory, and hidden streams gurgling over smooth stones. I'd talk the whole way without restraint, the words flowing freer in the open, unconfined air, about the rusted-out Chevy I'd painstakingly resurrected that afternoon, coaxing its stubborn, seized engine back to roaring life with a meticulously rebuilt carburetor and fresh spark plugs, or a customer's offhand anecdote about their recent family vacation to the Adirondacks that stirred faint envies of adventures Sarah and I had once planned but never pursued, but always circling back inevitably to the heart of my burdens, the persistent losses that lingered like stubborn oil stains on weathered concrete, refusing to fade. Sarah used to love these woods more than anything, you know? Said they felt like a true home, with the way the dappled light filters through the branches like secrets being gently shared between old friends. Guess you're my home now, Echo? In ways I never saw coming, and certainly didn't deserve at first. Her occasional deliberate lean against my leg mid-stride, warm and solidly reassuring, was her answer enough in those instances, a wordless affirmation of compassion put into motion, drawing quiet parallels to the real-life accounts I'd delved into from books on the shelves at the local library about search and rescue dogs working in mountainous terrains, how their intuitive, unbreakable bonds with handlers transform strangers into essential lifelines during the direst crises imaginable. Winter's full fury descended upon us in December with unyielding force, turning the undulating hills into a pristine yet punishing landscape of deep, powdery drifts that swallowed footsteps whole and biting winds that whistled menacingly through cracks in the house's aging window frames. But Echo adapted with the innate resilience of her breed, her thick undercoat trapping precious body heat like a meticulously crafted natural parka, even as she occasionally slipped out the dog door to revisit her old post during brief lulls in the relentless storms. I'd trudge out alongside her on those blustery days, shoveling a narrow but serviceable path to the road with my trusty weathered spade that had seen better decades, the physical effort warming my muscles more effectively than any layered coat could. And we'd sit together by the steadfast fence, her head resting companionably on my knee, as fat snowflakes danced around us like silent, ethereal confetti from the heavens. Our conversations deepened organically in those isolated, cocooned moments, far removed from the world's incessant distractions and judgments. I describe Sarah's radiant smile in vivid, nostalgic detail, The way it lit up her hazel eyes during our early drives down that very road with windows rolled down and the radio playing scratchy old country tunes that made us both sing off-key, or how the divorce's lingering pain had felt like an endless, fruitless waiting for her to turn back the clock, for the envisioned life we'd sketched on napkins to somehow materialize against all odds. Echo's blue eyes, reflecting the pale, diffused winter light during daylight hours, or the warm, flickering glow of a portable lantern I'd bring on the darker evenings to extend our time, seemed to hold an unjudging depth that absorbed my raw confessions without a hint of recoil. Her gentle nuzzle against my gloved hand a soothing balm that eased the raw, inflamed edges of old emotional wounds I'd long ignored. One particularly grueling night, when a massive nor'easter barreled in from the northwest, rattling the shutters violently and piling snow in mountainous heaps against the front door until it wouldn't budge, she paced restlessly by the living room window, whining low and plaintively in her throat, her husky instincts inexorably pulling her toward the road despite the evident danger of the whiteout conditions. I bundled us both up against the onslaught, her in a makeshift coat I'd sewn crudely from an old flannel shirt of mine using needle and thread from Sarah's sewing kit, me in every insulating layer I owned from thermal base to waterproof shell. And we drove there in the truck, parking strategically with the headlights piercing the blizzard like defiant beacons, the heater blasting full force as she pressed her cold nose to the dashboard, staring intently down the invisible, snow-obscured lane. "He's not coming back down that road, girl, no matter how long or faithfully we wait in the cold," I said softly, my voice steady and anchoring against the relentless howl outside the cab. "But I'm here with you now, through every storm, and that's something solid we can both hold on to like a promise." She whined once more, a sound laced with the first hints of acceptance and release, then rested her heavy head on my lap with a deep sigh, her radiating warmth seeping gradually through the layers of fabric, marking an indelible turning point where our trust solidified into something unbreakable and profound, forged in the crucible of shared adversity. Illness struck unexpectedly and without mercy in late February, catching us both completely off guard after a deceptive week of unseasonably warm weather that had melted some of the accumulated snowpack, only to refreeze overnight into treacherous, glassy sheets of ice that cracked underfoot like warnings. Echo refused her breakfast bowl one crisp morning, her usual vibrant vigor replaced by an unsettling lethargy, her blue eyes dulled and half-lidded as she curled tightly into a ball on her designated bed, breaths coming shallow and labored in irregular rhythms. Her legendary husky resilience, that storied stamina that had carried her ancestors through the wild, prolonged winters of Siberia and powered modern sled teams across competitive races like the Yukon Quest, seemed to fade visibly before my anxious eyes, and a cold panic gripped my chest as I bundled her gently into the passenger seat of the truck for the tense, short drive to Doc Harlan's well-equipped clinic on the town's quieter edge, the vet who'd treated generations of working dogs in these rural parts with a no-nonsense expertise honed from decades in the field. He diagnosed a stubborn respiratory infection, likely contracted from the damp, lingering chill that had seeped into her lungs after too many exposed nights in the wild before our bond formed, prescribing a course of broad-spectrum antibiotics, strict rest in a warm environment, and plenty of hydrating fluids administered carefully, drawing directly from similar cases he'd handled in northern sled dog teams up in the Adirondacks, where such ailments could quickly sideline even the toughest, most conditioned animals if not addressed promptly and thoroughly. Those subsequent nights blurred into a vigil of my own making, sitting up through the wee hours in the old armchair beside her bed with a single lamp casting soft, comforting shadows across the room, holding her close to my chest as she trembled through spiking fevers and fitful sleeps, whispering encouragements drawn from my own hard-fought battles with grief's invisible, insidious illnesses, the way it saps your will and leaves you feeling utterly hollow inside, but ultimately yields to persistent time, care, and the refusal to surrender. Hang in there, Echo. We've got more roads to walk together, more untold stories to share under clearer skies, I'd murmur reassuringly, spooning small amounts of warmed, nutrient-rich broth into her mouth when she could muster the strength, her weak but determined tail thump against my arm, my hard-won reward in the dim hours. Her recovery unfolded slowly but steadily over the ensuing weeks, her energy returning in encouraging fits and starts, first a tentative wag of her curled tail when I'd enter the room, then short, supervised walks in the fenced backyard where she'd sniff the first brave crocuses pushing through the thawing soil with renewed, inquisitive interest. Her blue eyes gradually regaining their characteristic piercing spark as spring's gentle heralds crept in around us. That harrowing ordeal taught me the true meaning of perseverance in a way no self-help book or passing advice ever could. Her gradual mending process mirroring my own uneven path through the aftermath of divorce's emotional rubble, instilling a deeper, more rooted hope that even the harshest winters must eventually give way to the inevitable renewal of spring's embrace. Spring's arrival felt like an earned gift after that taxing trial, the world outside bursting forth into exuberant life with the slow, persistent melt, revealing carpets of delicate wildflowers along the winding trails, the cheerful birdsong filling the air where bitter wind had once howled unchecked, and longer days that chased away the last tenacious shadows of winter with golden persistence. Echo's spirit surged vibrantly with the season's renewal, her romps on the greening paths revealing a previously glimpsed but now fully emergent playful side, chasing iridescent butterflies with explosive bursts of husky speed that left me breathless and laughing as I tried to keep pace, or rolling ecstatically in patches of sun-warmed grass with joyful abandon, her silver coat shimmering like fresh fallen snow caught in the midday sun. The surprise announcement of her pregnancy came quietly in early May, after a few tense days when she'd vanished briefly into the surrounding woods during her natural heat cycle, returning a touch leaner but with a serene contentment in her gait. The litter made its dramatic entrance on a balmy night in the heart of the kitchen, 3 fluffy, husky bundles born into the world in the sturdy whelping box I'd hastily prepared following step-by-step online guides and Doc Harlan's practical telephone advice, 2 sturdy, wriggling boys inheriting their mother's distinctive masked faces and curled tails, and 1 delicate girl whose vivid blue eyes opened first among them, staring up at us with innocent wonder that melted any remaining reservations. Echo's mothering instincts proved fierce and tender, in equal, harmonious measure, her protective growls initially warding off even my most well-intentioned approaches to check on the newborns, but soon evolving into shared duties as she meticulously licked their tiny, downy forms clean and guided them with gentle nudges to nurse from her warmth, her actions a masterclass in unconditional, instinctual love that transcended words. Raising those energetic pups stirred long-buried memories of what Sarah and I had once dreamed of so vividly, a house alive with the patter of little feet, bursts of laughter, and the messy joy of family life. But instead of reopening festering old scars, it brought a profound, liberating acceptance, the chaos of midnight feedings amid whimpers, the sharp nips of teething that drew pinpricks of blood on my knuckles transforming into moments of pure, unfiltered hope that filled the rooms with light. Bottle feeding the weakest pup through his early, precarious struggles, watching him grow stronger and more adventurous under our combined care with each passing day, I finally forgave the haunting what-ifs that had shadowed me for years, the family that circumstances denied us, and found instead a resilient, makeshift one in the delighted yips, clumsy tumbles, and curious explorations of this unexpected furry pack. Much like the heartfelt stories of Iditarod mushers who've shared in interviews how their teams became surrogate families after enduring personal tragedies, turning loss into unexpected bonds of strength. Summer days stretched out lazy and golden under endless blue skies, the growing pack in tow as we explored further afield into sunlit meadows and shaded glens, the pup's boundless, irrepressible energy turning every outing into a lively adventure. Vega, the bold and adventurous girl, leading daring charges into fragrant thickets with her mother's unquenchable curiosity driving her forward. Sirius, the more thoughtful and observant boy, pausing frequently to survey his surroundings, with eyes that held an almost precocious wisdom beyond his tender age, and little Nova tumbling after the others with endless infectious enthusiasm that lit up the trails. Our final poignant visit to the quarry came on a perfect, idyllic afternoon in mid-July, the air alive with the steady, soothing hum of cicadas hidden in the trees, and the faint buzz of dragonflies over nearby ponds as we hiked steadily to the familiar fence line, the pups romping ahead with unchecked glee, while Echo approached the old, weathered truck one last time, sniffing the tarnished plaque with a lingering, contemplative nose before turning away decisively at last, her tail held high in a proud curl of final closure, signaling her readiness to leave the weight of the past behind for the promise of new, uncharted paths ahead. Through it all, those moments of quiet, introspective awareness deepened profoundly on dappled trails warmed by the sun, where I'd consciously release another fragment of Sarah's lingering ghost, forgiving her bold choices in seeking a different life, my own shortcomings in prioritizing work over connection, Echo's steady, affirming head resting warmly on my knee as we paused to catch our breath, confirming that true healing blooms naturally from such deliberate releases of what no longer serves. These days, with the first hints of fall leaves beginning to turn in fiery displays once more, Echo waits patiently for me at the door each evening upon my return, the pups swirling around her heels in a joyful whirlwind of wagging tails and playful paws, her blue eyes sparkling with the pure, uncomplicated joy of belonging and security. That road's endless, poignant weight may have broken hearts with its raw display of sorrow and unyielding fidelity, but the enduring bond we forged in its shadow mends them anew with gentle persistence, a living testament to loyalty's radiant, enduring light that pierces even the darkest nights, leaving a gentle, indelible, warm imprint on the soul that whispers softly of hope's eternal, unwavering promise.